Welcome to Pleasurology Island. I'm Freethought Steve, the lone pleasurologist. Today I want to do a little change of pace, do a little bit of literary pleasurology. Pleasurology means accepting ourselves completely, especially accepting all aspects of our own personal sexuality, which is different from anybody else's personal sexuality. And each of us has the right to feel and express and enjoy our own personal sexuality, whatever it happens to be, without interference from anybody else, without judgments from anybody else about what it is that we ourselves happen to enjoy. And today my topic is getting high and being gay with Gertrude Stein. Gertrude Stein enjoyed, apparently, hashish. In the 1960s, Gertrude Stein's wife, Alice B. Toklas, became famous for having written the Alice B. Toklas cookbook, which contained a recipe for hashish fudge. And there was even a movie entitled I Love You, Alice B. Toklas, about the joys of cannabis that came out in the late 1960s. And I have read somewhere, a description of Gertrude Stein as lying around on a couch all day smoking hashish, which I'm sure is quite inaccurate, because she did many, many things, and I'm sure her hashish taking was not how she spent her entire day. I think she went and wrote every night. She might have gotten high before she wrote, because when you read some of the things that Gertrude Stein wrote when she was there in Paris, she and Alice Toklas lived in Paris, on the left bank of Paris, surrounded by artists and other intellectuals of a literary sort. They knew a vast number of people. But anyway, at night, I think Gertrude did her writing. And if you read some of her writing that she did, you could take that writing and take it to 1967 and put it in the San Francisco Oracle. The San Francisco Oracle was the psychedelic underground paper of San Francisco during those years, and all the articles, were written while people were high on acid or cannabis or something. And so a lot of Gertrude Stein's work would just fit right in there. I'm going to read you a short selection today from something that she wrote. She was a friend of Hemingway. She kind of mentored Hemingway, and she was an early friend of Picasso. She was the first supporter of Picasso's work. She had a collection of the avant-garde artists from the 1900s, early 1900s, in her house. Picasso painted her portrait. She wanted to be part of the literary underground, the literary avant-garde. And so this was one of the things that she wrote. This is a description of two ladies that she knew. She identifies them as Miss Mars and Miss Squires, but in the little piece that she wrote about them, she calls them Miss Fur and Miss Skeen. And they are two women who have left their homes in America where they could not be happy because they couldn't be themselves. And they came to Paris where they could be themselves and cultivate their own individuality. She talks about them cultivating their own voice, each one their own voice. And I think that's a symbol for them cultivating their unique individuality, which they could do in Paris that they couldn't do back home in America. And there were a lot of lesbian women who ended up in Paris because there they could have lesbian lovers, they could live with their lesbian lovers, and they would not be criticized or in danger of being ostracized by the community. And there was a community of artists and intellectuals there that included many lesbian women. And so these were two of them. They could come to, Miss Fur and Miss Skeen could come to Paris, and they could be themselves there. And so this is a little portrait of these two women that Gertrude Stein wrote, sort of celebrating their ability to be themselves. And at one point they go home and they visit going back home, and they know they can't stay back home because they can't be themselves there. So they come back, and anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to overinterpret it for you. And you could ask yourself, there will be a quiz at the end. You can ask yourself, whether Gertrude Stein had a prescient idea of how this story would sound being read 103 years after it was first published. It was published first in 1922, and in fact it was published in Vanity Fair magazine, and it became quite popular, and I think it was one of the first things that made Gertrude Stein's name popular. But I just wonder if the readers of Vanity Fair would have understood it the same way that we understand it today, or the way that it sounds to us today. Helen Fur had quite a pleasant home. Her mother, Mrs. Fur, was quite a pleasant woman. Mr. Fur was quite a pleasant man. Helen Fur had quite a pleasant voice, a voice quite worth cultivating. She did not mind working. She worked to cultivate her voice. She did not find it gay, living in the same place where she had always been living. She went to a place where some were cultivating something, voices and other things needing cultivating. She met Georgine Skeen there, who was cultivating her voice, which some thought was quite a pleasant one. Helen Fur and Georgine Skeen lived together then. Georgine Skeen liked traveling. Helen Fur did not care about traveling. She liked to stay in one place and be gay there. They were together then and traveled to another place and stayed there and were gay there. They stayed there and were gay there. Not very gay there, just gay there. They were both gay there. They were regularly working there, both of them cultivating their voices there. They were both gay there. Georgine Skeen was gay there, and she was regular in being gay, regular in not being gay, regular in being a gay one who was one not being gay longer than was needed to be one being quite a gay one. They were both gay then, there, and both working there, then. They were, in a way, both gay there where there were many cultivating something. They were both regular in being gay there. Helen Fur was gay there. She was gayer and gayer there. And really, she was just gay there. She was gayer and gayer there. That is to say, she found ways of being gay there that she was using in being gay there. She was gay there. Not gayer and gayer, just gay there. That is to say, she was not gayer by using the things she found there that were gay things. She was gay there, always. She was gay there. They were quite regularly gay there, Helen Fur and Georgine Skeen. They were quite regularly gay there, where they were gay. They were very regularly gay. To be regularly gay was to do every day the gay thing that they did every day. To be regularly gay was to end every day at the same time after they had been regularly gay. They were regularly gay. They were gay every day. They ended every day in the same way at the same time, and they had been every day regularly gay. The voice Helen Furr was cultivating was quite a pleasant one. The voice Georgine Skeen was cultivating was, some said, a better one. The voice Helen Furr was cultivating, she cultivated, and it was quite completely a pleasant enough one then, a cultivated enough one then. The voice Georgine Skeen was cultivating, she did not cultivate too much. She cultivated it quite some. She cultivated, and she would sometimes go on cultivating it, and it was not then an unpleasant one. It would not be then an unpleasant one. It would be a quite richly enough cultivated one. It would be quite richly enough to be a pleasant enough one. They were gay where there were many cultivating something. The two were gay there, were regularly gay there. Gertrude Stein repeats a lot of stuff over and over. That's her style, is to repeat and repeat and repeat. Georgine Skeen would have liked to do more traveling. They did some traveling, not very much traveling. Georgine Skeen would have liked to do more traveling. Helen Furr did not care about doing traveling. She liked to stay in a place and be gay there. They stayed in a place and were gay there. Both of them stayed there. They stayed together there. They were gay there. They were regularly gay there. They went quite often, not very often, but they did go back to where Helen Furr had a pleasant enough home. And then Georgine Skeen went to a place where her brother had quite some distinction. They both went, every few years, went visiting to where Helen Furr had quite a pleasant home. Certainly, Helen Furr would not find it gay to stay. She did not find it gay. She said she would not stay. She said she did not find it gay. She said she would not stay where she did not find it gay. She said she found it gay where she did stay, and she did stay there, where very many were cultivating something. She did stay there. She always did find it gay there. She went to see them where she had always been living and where she did not find it gay. She had a pleasant home there. Mrs. Furr, her mother, was a pleasant enough woman. Mr. Furr was a pleasant enough man. Helen told them, and they were not worrying, that she did not find it gay living where she had always been living. Georgine Skeen and Helen Furr were living where they were both cultivating their voices, and they were gay there. They visited where Helen Furr had come from, and then they went to where they were living, where they were then regularly living. Helen Furr and Georgine Skeen were regularly living where very many were living and cultivating in themselves something. Helen Furr and Georgine Skeen were living very regularly then, being very regularly then in being gay then. They did then learn many ways to be gay, and they were then being gay, being quite regular in being gay, and they were learning little things in ways of being gay. They were very regular then. They were learning very many little things in ways of being gay. They were being gay and using these little things they were learning to have to be gay with, regularly gay with. And they were gay the same amount they had been gay. They were quite gay. They were quite regular. They were learning little things, gay little things. They were gay inside them the same amount they had been gay. They were gay the same length of time they had been gay every day. They were regular in being gay. They learned little things that are things in being gay. They learned many little things that are things in being gay. They were gay every day. They were regular. They were gay. They were gay the same length of time every day. They were gay. They were quite regularly gay. Georgine Skeen went away to stay 2 months with her brother. Helen Furr did not go then to stay with her father and her mother. Helen Furr stayed there where they had been regularly living, the two of them. And she would then certainly not be lonesome. She would go on being gay. She did go on being gay. She was not any more gay, but she was gay longer every day than they had been being gay when they were together being gay. She was gay then quite exactly the same way. She learned a few more little ways of being gay. She was quite gay, and in the same way she had been gay. And she was gay a little longer in the day. More of each day she was gay. She was gay longer every day than when the two of them had been being gay. She was gay quite in the way they had been gay, quite in the same way. She was not lonesome then. She was not at all feeling any need of having Georgine Skeen. She was not astonished at this thing. She would have been a little astonished by this thing, but she knew she was not astonished at anything. And so she was not astonished at this thing, not astonished at not feeling any need of having Georgine Skeen. Helen Furr had quite a completely pleasant voice, and it was quite well enough cultivated, and she could use it. And she did use it. But then there was not any way of working at cultivating a completely pleasant voice when it has become a completely well enough cultivated one. And there was not much use in using it when one was not wanting it to be helping to make one a gay one. Helen Furr was not needing using her voice to be a gay one. She was gay then, and sometimes she used her voice, and she was not using it very often. It was quite completely enough cultivated, and it was quite completely a pleasant one, and she did not use it very often. She was quite exactly as gay as she had been. She was gay a little longer in the day than she had been. She was gay exactly the same way. She was never tired of being gay that way. She had learned very many little ways to use in being gay. Very many were telling about using other ways in being gay. She was gay enough. She was always gay exactly the same way. She was always learning little things to use in being gay. She was telling about using other ways in being gay. She was telling about learning other ways in being gay. She was learning other ways in being gay. She would be using other ways in being gay. She would always be gay in the same way. When Georgine Skeen was there, not so long each day as when Georgine Skeen was away. She came to using many ways in being gay. She came to use every way in being gay. She went on living where many were cultivating something, and she was gay. She had used every way to be gay. They did not live together then, Helen Furr and Georgine Skeen. Helen Furr lived there the longer where they had been living regularly together. Then neither of them were living there any longer. Helen Furr was living somewhere else then, and telling some about being gay. And she was gay there, And she was living quite regularly then. She was regularly gay then. She was quite regular in being gay then. She remembered all the little ways of being gay. She used all the little ways of being gay. She was quite regularly gay. She told many then the way of being gay. She taught very many then little ways they could use in being gay. She was living very well. She was gay then. She went on living then. She was regular in being gay. She always was living very well and was gay very well and was telling about little ways one could be learning to use in being gay, and later was telling them quite often, telling them again and again. So my question here, I told you there was going to be a quiz. My question was, did hearing this story tickle your funny bone to the point where you laughed at some point during the story? That's my question to you. So there's no right or wrong answer. Either you did find it funny or you didn't. I myself, when I first started reading it, I had no idea what was coming. And when I got to the second paragraph and saw that Gertrude Stein was going to be talking about being gay the entire time, I was taken by surprise, and I had to stop reading. I was reading it aloud. I was recording it on a digital recorder just for the fun of it to listen back to. And I had to stop recording because I had to laugh. And I had to laugh for about 5 minutes. It tickled my funny bone when I realized that Gertrude Stein was writing what she had written here. I just thought it was hilarious. And I hope you don't find that offensive. I don't mean it to be offensive. I just thought it was wonderful. I thought it was just delightful. Because here was a little story that would sort of normalize talking about being gay and talk about it so much that it became very normal. And that's what we need to do with all of our own personal sexual desires, whatever they happen to be, especially if they are desires which what I call the dinosaur culture, the old culture, the traditional culture, has traditionally disapproved of. If our personal sexual desires are desires that the traditional culture has tried to shame everybody for having, then it's very important that we take those aspects of our own sexuality and make them normal, make them socially normal and socially approved of rather than disapproved of. This is an important part of being sex positive. And pleasurology is about being sex positive so that we can use our sexual voice, cultivate our sexual voice to the point where we can be gay with it. We can rejoice with our sexual voice to the maximum extent possible. Now, you notice that at one point in the story there, Hélène Fur has developed her voice, which is probably her orgasmic capacity, as far as she can. She can't, she feels like she can't do any more than this. She has successfully learned how to have an orgasm and be gay with it. And one of the things about pleasurology is that in pleasurology, we can learn to develop our sexual voice and our orgasms to a higher and higher level of expansiveness in our consciousness and of power in the pleasure when we have the orgasm. And so that's what my program that I'm trying to share with you before I die so that somebody can carry it on. The program of cannabis, body, mind, relaxation, sex positive pleasurology with expanded pre-orgasmic sexual bliss and cosmic oceanic orgasms. This is all about learning how to expand our capacity for sexual pleasure. And the key to it, as I've said before, is relaxation. We have to be relaxed with our own sexuality. Even, and especially if the mainstream dinosaur culture has taught us as we were growing up to feel ashamed about any aspect of our sexual life. For me, it was masturbation. And from the ages of 12 on, I was taught that masturbation was a sin and sexual desire was a sinful lust because I was raised in a Christian upbringing. And even those of us who maybe did not have a heavy Christian upbringing in our family, nevertheless, we all grew up in a culture which has been Christian and therefore sex negative for thousands of years now. And it's only been the last 50 years, between 50 and 60 years since the sexual revolution of the late 1960s, that new sex positive attitudes have been embraced and openly embraced by a good segment of our population, even though the mainstream culture is still, the dinosaur culture is still fighting back, particularly among people like evangelical Christians. And the key to my body-mind pleasurology theory is that our capacity for pleasure has been diminished in our brain, in our body, in our consciousness. Our capacity for pleasure has been diminished by all the anti-sexual education, the miseducation that we got, telling us to feel ashamed of our sexual feelings. If we believed it at all as we were growing up, our emotional brain internalized and made a habit out of feeling ashamed and anxious about our sexuality and guilty about our sexuality. And so if we want to become sex positive, we have to re-educate our emotional brain, our emotions, our feelings about sex, re-educate our body to relax away the physical tensions in our body that accumulated throughout years of emotional tension and conflict about sex. We need to relax away the muscle tension. We need to relax away our emotional tension and our emotional gridlock, our emotional inhibitions, be able to have catharsis, a free expression of whatever we happen to be feeling so that we aren't holding our emotions in. And we need to change our attitude cognitively, intellectually, so that we are very clear about what our sexual values are, what our ethical values are, so that we can feel that we are genuinely morally good people, ethically good people, people whose behavior should be approved of whenever we are learning to create euphoric states of consciousness for ourselves and other people. And that's our goal in sexuality, is to create the most euphoric experiences we can for ourselves and for whoever else may be participating in the activity, whether they're right there with us or whether they're on the other end of the phone or on a computer somewhere else. But if we're having some kind of sexual interaction with another person, we want to be sure that we're all having a euphoric state of consciousness, and that is, in fact, the most ethically valuable thing that we can do in life, is to create euphoric states of consciousness. Because if we create euphoric states of consciousness, those are the only intrinsically valuable things in life. There is nothing else in life that has value in and of itself. The only thing that has value in and of itself is a euphoric state of consciousness. Everything else we do is for the purpose of creating euphoric states of consciousness. But it's the euphoric states of consciousness that are the end in themselves. That's what we're trying to produce, is euphoric states of consciousness, and not just for ourselves, but for other people as well. Because we can be a lot happier when we're surrounded by people who are happier. And when we ourselves are happier, we treat other people much more nicely, and therefore they are happier, and they like having us around because we are happier, and therefore they like us more because we help them be happier, and therefore they help us be happier. And so everybody's running around being happy, or as Gertrude Stein would say, being gay, you know. I think she was using gay in a broader sense than simply same-sex activity, but any kind of activity, any kind of sexual activity that truly makes an individual happy and euphoric. Now, what's the condition for making ourselves sexually euphoric and having a really powerful orgasm that satisfies our sex drive so that we feel totally sexually satisfied and we can go out and be gay with everybody around us, be happy and friendly and affectionate with everyone around us? What's the key to doing that? The key is learning what it is that genuinely turns on our own emotional brain. And many of us know this already. And we've known for years just exactly what sort of thing turns us on. Some people still have to discover, particularly, and this is talking particularly about same-sex arousal. If we happen to have an emotional brain whose sexiness recognition centers are activated by someone of our own sex rather than the opposite sex or the other sex, we need to recognize this, but sometimes people will deny that fact to themselves. They won't allow themselves to feel an attraction to a member of their own sex simply because society has condemned it. The dinosaur culture, the sex-negative dinosaur culture, has condemned same-sex activity, and particularly if you've been raised in a Christian evangelical culture. So when we've been subjected to cultural influences like that have made us deny our own sexuality, then it's very important for us to stop accepting the dinosaur attitude towards sex and embrace the new, more realistic attitude towards sex, which is that human sexuality is polymorphous. It has many, many shapes, and we can learn many different ways of being sexual, of being gay. We can learn lots of little different ways of being gay, of giving ourselves sexual arousal, and of enjoying our sexuality if we accept the fact that sex is a very broad thing and that our brain can learn to be turned on by lots of different things, but it will definitely be turned on more strongly by some things than other things, and we should learn what it is that our own brain is most turned on by. And then we should use that knowledge in our sexual fantasies and in our sexual attractions to other people so that we can, in fact, have experiences. They don't have to be full-on intimate sexual experiences. They can be flirting experiences, various levels of erotic interchange experiences with people who actually turn on our emotional brain as much as possible. And the important thing to recognize is this. The dinosaur culture, the sex-negative dinosaur culture, has tried to say that sexual attractions for members of our own sex are somehow unnatural. And they're basing that on the idea that sex evolved for the purpose of reproduction, and therefore sex evolved for the purpose of male-female sexuality, and that therefore anything other than male-female sexuality is not using our sex drive for the evolutionary purpose for which a sex drive evolved originally. Okay? Now, that's a logical argument, but it has a number of mistakes in it. It is defining what is natural in a very archaic way, in a very narrow way. There's many ways of talking about what is natural or what is not natural. Now, we don't know why, but a certain percentage of human beings around the globe in all cultures are attracted to members of their own sex, either primarily, exclusively, or along with being attracted to members of the other sex. Human beings' brains are different. Our emotional brains are different, and it's our emotional brain that contains the sexiness recognition centers that finds a certain situation with a certain individual, an erotic situation, that deserves the emotional response of becoming sexually turned on, sexually aroused, sexually interested in that person, and having a desire to interact with that person in some sexy way. Now, what I'm saying is that a definition of what is natural doesn't depend on a biological function of sex for reproduction. Human beings use all of our talents for many different ways that were never thought of by natural selection. I mean, we didn't evolve our eyes in order to be able to read. We didn't evolve our hands in order to be able to write or to sculpt things. Nevertheless, we have these abilities and we use them in ways that give us pleasure. Our bodies didn't evolve to do ballet or to do any other kind of jazz dance, rock dance, whatever kind of dance we want to do. Our bodies didn't evolve to do that. Our bodies evolved to be able to swing through trees and then to hunt and to run away from predators and stuff like that. Dance was not part of why we evolved our athletic abilities. And yet, there's nothing wrong with using our athletic abilities to dance simply because we enjoy doing it. And other people enjoy watching us if we're a good dancer. So it's the same way with sexuality. We don't have to be confined by what is biologically the reason for sex evolving. Somehow there's a reason that some of us have evolved a sexual attraction to members of the same sex and a desire to do activities which are not reproductive in any way. And there are people who are attracted to members of the other sex who want to do lots of activities that are not reproductive, but are just fun and exciting to do. So what I'm saying is there is though, something that's natural in sexuality and something that's unnatural in sexuality. But it's different from what the dinosaur culture says. What's natural, what's really natural in sexuality is for each of us to engage in the kind of sexual activity with the kind of partner that our own personal emotional brain is naturally and spontaneously attracted to. That's what's natural for each person, to sexually interact with people that our own personal emotional brain is naturally and spontaneously attracted to, whether it's a member of the same sex or the other sex or both sex, So, it is natural for us to enjoy fantasizing about whatever it is that turns on our emotional brain the most. And it's natural for us to have orgasms, having fantasies that involve whatever it is that our own emotional brain happens to be most aroused by. And each of us has a unique history of sexual experiences in our life, of erotic experiences in which we have become turned on. Although some people's sexual history may be almost blank. If they've lived and grown up in a very repressive sexual culture, they may never have had any sexual experiences to get turned on by. And they need to then find ones, experiment, and find sexual stimuli that do naturally arouse their emotional brain so that they can learn to have arousal, high arousal, and orgasm. But most of us have had some kinds of sexual experience, and the ones that we have early in life are ones that are very powerful in forming our sexual turn-ons. And so the experiences we may have had during childhood, during the period when we want to play I'll show you mine if you'll show me yours, if we've been lucky enough to have some of those experiences, those will help develop some turn-ons in our emotional brain. It will help us get turned on by the idea of showing our body to someone else and being able to have them show their body to us and us enjoy looking at each other's bodies. Then later on, we may have had more intimate physical contact and sexual contact with certain individuals during puberty particularly and during teenage years. Those experiences that we had that were the sexiest experiences that we had at that time when our emotional brain's sexual circuits were developing and becoming mature, those are very powerful. Those are extra powerful sexual memories, the memories from our teenage years. And whatever they happen to be, they will always be able to produce sexual arousal from our emotional brain if we allow ourselves to fantasize about them. And cannabis is very good at allowing ourselves, if we're wanting to learn to make our ability to become sexually aroused more powerful and easier to get turned on, then cannabis can allow us to immerse our consciousness in our imagination in whatever kind of fantasy spontaneously comes to mind, whatever kind of memory spontaneously comes to mind as being, something really sexy that we witnessed or experienced in those first years after reaching puberty. These years are what are called a critical period of development. And for every different human skill, there's a critical period of development. Language, there's a critical period of developing language, but it occurs much earlier in life when we're like 2, 3 years old, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. That's a critical period of learning for language. It would be a critical period for learning to walk. But for sexuality, the critical period is at puberty and for the few years after that. So if we want to learn and practice becoming gayer and gayer with our own sexual arousal ability to make our consciousness more and more euphoric by contacting the memories that we have stored in our brain from that critical period of development when we were teenagers, then cannabis is a way we can relax and we can allow those memories to come back. And whatever they are, we don't want to censor them. We want to let them come fully into consciousness and not be ashamed of them at all. Because whatever those memories are that we have, they are memories that our emotional brain learned in a very natural way because we were having some kind of erotic experience that matched the sexiness recognition center in our emotional brain. Our emotional brain has a built-in center for recognizing things that are sexy that was built by our genetics. You know, we got our genes built our brain, and our brain contains within the emotional brain centers for recognizing a situation and a person as being sexy. And so all of our sexual turn-ons are ones that we learned because we happened to be in specific situations with a specific individual that happened to match our sexiness center, its criteria for a sexy situation, a situation that deserved the emotional response of becoming sexually aroused. And when we become sexually aroused, this is a change that happens throughout our organism. It's not just happening in our sex organs. It's starting in our emotional brain. Our emotional brain simultaneously puts out a number of kinds of sexual arousal output. There's output to our consciousness, making us feel that particular kind of euphoric pleasure that's associated with a situation being really sexy. You know, a sexy situation just feels different from any other kind. It feels pleasurable in a different way from any other kind of situation. That's our sexual circuits, sexual arousal circuits in our emotional brain becoming active and sending sexual arousal energy into our consciousness. At the same time, our emotional brain is connecting with our autonomic nervous system, the sort of independent emotional branch of our nervous system that goes down to our body, that runs down our spine into our pelvis, and there the nerves run out to the sex organs. And when those nerves are activated, what they do is they cause the blood vessels running to the sex organs to open up wider. Those blood vessels open up. The autonomic nervous system at the same time is making the heart pump harder and faster. So the heart is pumping blood into our bloodstream harder and faster under higher pressure. It's going down to the sex organs, and those arteries, the blood vessels that are allowing the blood to flow into the sex organs, are opening up so that more blood flows into the sex organs than can flow out of the sex organs. And this causes the sex organs to swell up and become moist in the case of women. In the case of men, it produces erection of the penis. In the case of women, it produces erection of the clitoris, erection of the nipples, and moistening of the vagina. The inside of the vagina becomes moist, and the interior of the vagina opens up. The moisture comes out, lubricates the labia, the lips of the vagina, and that makes it possible for things to come into the vagina more easily. And the vagina has opened up in order to receive whatever is going to come into it more easily. And so sexual arousal prepares our body for physical sexual interaction of some sort. So our challenge in future talks here is going to be to get ourselves physically relaxed, emotionally relaxed, by accepting our sexual turn-ons, whatever they happen to be. They have all been learned by natural psychological laws. And we could not have not learned those sexual turn-ons. We can suppress those sexual turn-ons after they've been learned, and anytime we start to get turned on, we can shut down our sexual circuits with emotional inhibition and prevent ourselves from getting turned on by those things. But nevertheless, those things are still there. Those turn-ons have been learned by our emotional brain because we were in some kind of a situation that activated the sexiness recognition centers of our emotional brain, made us sexually aroused, that felt pleasurable, and that pleasurable memory gets recorded in our brain. Particularly if our sexual arousal became so pleasurable and we gave ourselves some physical stimulation, or someone else gave us some physical stimulation to the point where the pleasure became so great in consciousness that it triggered our orgasm reflex. And then we get a whole nother set of pleasurable sensations coming from the orgasm itself, and those are like super pleasurable sensations, and they leave a super pleasurable memory in the memory banks of our brain. And that memory will stay there because it's a very vivid memory. And particularly if we have given ourselves many orgasms over a period of time using a particular fantasy that has turned us on because of some specific situation, erotic situation that we have been through and lived in, those memories will become deeply ingrained in our brain, and our sex drive, our natural biological sex drive, wants to be satisfied on a regular basis. And when it's not satisfied on a regular basis, it makes us antsy and uncomfortable and tense. And it will try to put images in our mind of an activity and of a sexual fantasy that will lead us to have another orgasm. And so we will want to repeat that. And if we try not to repeat that, if we try to deny our sexual arousal feelings, what we're doing is creating a battle within our own emotional brain, a battle within ourselves. We're fighting against ourselves emotionally. And what happens when you've got a wrestling match? It's a wrestling match between sexual desire on one side and sexual repression, the dinosaur culture, sexual repression on the other side. What have you got? You've got tension. And when you have that for years, because we're fighting our own sexual drive, that tension becomes a habit throughout our entire body. And that's why it's so important for us to do muscle relaxation exercises, emotional release exercises, consciousness calming exercises, emotional relaxation exercises, and attention centering exercises, and the ability to clear our mind of thoughts so that we can learn how to relax completely, relax that tension, that chronic tension that has been built into our bodies by sexual conflict over the years. Relax that tension away so we can be calm and not have that tension. And then remain calm when we begin to have sexual activity, and remain completely calm and free of anxiety, shame, or guilt throughout the entire cycle of sexual arousal, orgasm, and then resolution of the sex drive, coming back down and coming back down and being calm again without relapsing into a state of tension, shame, and guilt, which is often what happens to us. We have an orgasm, we're able to get turned on and have an orgasm, but then as soon as the sex drive dissipates because it's been satisfied, then our old shame training piles on top of us and makes us feel guilty and anxious and tense all over. And that's totally undesirable. That's not a good ethical thing. That's a bad ethical thing, to have our consciousness go into dysphoria, unpleasant consciousness, instead of remaining calm and euphoric the way that it ought to remain after we've had an orgasm. And we say, wow, that was great. I have just satisfied my orgasm to the max. I've satisfied my sex drive to the max with a thoroughly satisfying orgasm, that was a good thing to do. My sex drive has been satisfied. I haven't hurt anybody else. I haven't seriously annoyed anybody else, unless I've made so much noise that the neighbors can't be sleeping or something. But basically, we can satisfy our own sex drive and then calmly go on to doing something else without having that sexual tension at the back of our mind making us tense while we're trying to do something else and kind of distracting us. We can be single-minded if we have satisfied our sex drive and we are completely at peace with our own conscience about it. If we feel like, yeah, that was a good thing to do. I had an orgasm using the fantasy which turns me on the most, and I haven't hurt anybody at all. All I have done is create a euphoric state of consciousness in my own consciousness. And now, after that, I'm still filled with endorphins and good chemicals, and I'm going to stay relaxed. I'm going to be proud of myself for having been able to cultivate my sexual voice, as Gertrude Stein might say. Yes, we've been cultivating these things. We've been cultivating our sexual voice. We've been able to use our sexual voice to give ourselves satisfaction, to be as gay as possible by using our sexual voice as well as possible. So anyway, I guess that's plenty for today. Hope you'll tune in again next time. Who knows what I'll be talking about? Let's find out then. Have a great day.